Is it the goodbyes that haunt you or the fear of new hellos? This is Wandering the Wild Mess with Heather Morgan. I am so happy that you're here. In this episode, I'm going to really talk about quitting time. That's really where this begins. It's kind of the journey of when you finally decide that everything in your old life just isn't serving the new self that you are. And when I call it quitting time, I think I mentioned before how music is just so influential in my life. I love to write myself. And so lyrics just hit me so often. And in the story I'm about to kind of tell you in the journey, it was back in September of 2023. And this is when Zach Bryan's album Quitting Time came out. And I knew it was going to hit me in the feels, as his lyrics often do. And there was just so many moments of just smacking me in the face. So that album was really, there was a couple of different albums that were really just like soundtracks to my whole new journey in life. I So I'm kind of going to go over just that whole new path and kind of the mental process of when we let go of things that are no longer for us and kind of move into this new aspect of our life. And one of the lyrics that I feel like rings so true is people die 1,000 times to get to who they are. I think sometimes we grieve like the old versions of ourselves and we're like, I would have never even thought that I'd be here who I am today. And I think when we all realize that often we all do that, we don't have to stay the same as we've always been just because we've been that way once before. Like we're allowed to grow and evolve and change and let go of things that don't serve us and move in different directions and take risks and chances on a new way of life. That's completely acceptable. We don't owe anyone the old version of us, even though it feels really hard when you love deep and you're loyal and you're a caring person to just say, well, I'm sorry, this is who I am now, or this is where I want to be. It feels, at least for someone that's very empathetic or just as a feeler, it feels a little unfair to them. Like, no, they're expecting the old version of you. You can't change yourself. They're more comfortable with you being someone else. And that was really this journey for me, is learning that. So I'll start it off, and I won't get too into detail about some of it because there's probably 100 stories within this one. But quitting time is very rings true to this scenario. So in my corporate role, just a little background, I had been seeking something that could fuel my soul a little more. And at the time, I was very stressed out about a lot of things, just as most of us are in any of our jobs that have a lot of pressure. And I wanted to seek a new opportunity and kind of do a little bit more entrepreneurship at the time. So I had made the decision to leave my corporate job, which was wildly crazy and took a lot of thought and consideration. But here I am. And this kind of led me to when I finally left Utah behind in a way that I didn't know would feel so impactful. So I had told my leader, which I adore and is still a friend of mine, that I was going to be leaving. And they asked me to stay on a little bit longer and come back out to Salt Lake and do some training. And then we were also in the middle of a whole bunch of other important things that just kind of needed me to be there. And the last thing I wanted to do was leave her high and dry. So I said I would stay on longer and I would fly to Salt Lake. And the timing kind of worked out because I had a few things left in my storage unit. I had got a storage unit, barely had anything but, paddleboard, golf clubs. I think I said all that, like just some little things that I wanted back with me. And I finally had a home to put them in. So I decided, okay, I'll fly out there, but then I'll drive back with my things. I'll rent a Suburban. It'll be big enough. That's how much stuff I had. It all fit. And it was timing wise, it worked. Got to go to the University of Utah home opener against Florida, which go Utes, they won. So everything, it was just going to be, at the time I didn't know they were going to win, but yeah, it was just perfect. So I say, okay, yes, I'll fly to Salt Lake. I'll work for a week. And then the next week, I'll, pack my things, enjoy my friends and family, and do the whole thing. So that trip was so good for me in a lot of ways, but it was so hard. And packing that storage unit was like revisiting everything all over again. I remember sitting in that storage unit and just crying because, and I remember it was Warren Zader's. It's, what was it? There was one about a cow. Basically, it's not always the cowboy that rides away. And I remember that song was just playing because I always have to have music on, and I was just crying. I didn't even know I would feel those emotions, but I knew that once I packed this storage unit up and put it in the Suburban, there was nothing of mine left in Salt Lake. I had left the company. I remember the last time I was in the building that I worked for, I remember leaving the office feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not coming back to this office in Salt Lake. And then in my storage unit, I remember thinking, okay, once it's empty and cleaned out, there's no more of me here in Salt Lake. Everything that was me, all of those connections, everything is done. So I packed up the Suburban. I remember parked it, had a great time at the Utes game. It was my girl's birthday weekend too. It was such a fun time. Then we beat Florida, so all the fun. And then back to reality. Now I'm making the drive back to Tennessee. And a lot of my friends are like, why are you driving back? But when I had first drove out to move to Tennessee, my girl came out with me. And although it was so fun and I loved that she was there and I probably needed at that time, I never did the real like leaving Utah by myself. And I felt like it was necessary for me. Like I felt like it was an experience that I needed to have, like driving away from Utah and like leaving it all behind and just going through those emotions by myself for whatever reason. So I kind of wanted that like road trip adventure, even though obviously me driving by myself halfway across the country is a little cray. I I wouldn't have changed it. And side note, I'm a lot of music, but I was remember just jamming out to this song. So obviously Kelsea Ballerini's EP about her divorce came out around the same time, and the song lyrics, "I kissed someone new last night, and now I don't care where you're sleeping, baby. We got along real nice until I wanted out. Now I know you hate me." I probably cried and sang to that song more than I should admit because it just felt so weird to be having some sort of like album or EP coming out and like exactly articulating my feelings like that did. So it was just so much music around me to kind of help me get through this. And I did feel like he hated me. And that was what was really hard. And I feel like hate, I say that strongly, but I know it's a strong word. I felt like it was, again, what I mentioned before. When you change your life and it affects other people's lives, it's like they're kind of upset that you're changing, even though it's your prerogative to, right? And and that's just really hard. So as I'm driving, I remember I hit the road, finally on my way, and I decide I need to go to Moab for a minute. And ironically or not, that was where we had spent our first anniversary because I remember we were going to Hawaii months later. So we kind of thought, okay, we'll just do our first anniversary somewhere close. Both love hiking in the outdoors, so it just made sense. And Moab's just a beautiful place. So I drove out of the way before Colorado to Moab, Utah, and went to Dead Horse Point by myself. And it's so beautiful there. And it was really just this like crazy freeing thing. And I remember getting there and there's like cars in the parking lot and there's this Tennessee license plate. And I'm like, Tennessee's here in Moab. Like there was so many signs along my journey. That was just the first of many of like just telling me that this is the right path for you, Heather. This is where you're supposed to be. It was so crazy. But I stop in Moab, super beautiful, just feeling the feels like this is weird that I'm here. It was our first anniversary, but I just needed to be here. And then seeing that Tennessee license plate, it was just, and then when I ended up, there's these two like older women walking around and look like a older mother and daughter. And I am a big person that loves pictures, right? And that's another story about my dad where I wish I had more. So that's why people are like, oh, you take a lot of pictures. And it's just something in my life that I always want to have those memories with the people I love or the moments that I had. And I saw them and I thought, hey, do you guys want me to take your picture? Because I felt like the oldest woman was pretty old and it was like seemed like a mother-daughter, like maybe one of those, end of the road kind of trips. And so they're like, yes, we'd love that. So then they start talking and they're from Tennessee, but they had also lived in like Missouri. And it was just so weird. Like so many things were just telling me like, that's where you should have been. Like, and I didn't even know that. I just offered to take the picture because I wanted them to have one. And then they just started talking to me. And anyways, so all that to say is there's so many signs in life that remind you you're in the right direction if you look for them and you'll know. So I leave Moab, spend the night in Colorado, and then make my way to Amarillo the next day. So now I'm in Texas. And I'm like, all right, I end up at this. I look around and there's really nothing in Amarillo, which most of you probably know, but I stop at the Big Texan. It's like literally, I feel like the one thing to do in Amarillo. And I'm ready, like I want some dinner. I stop in. I end up sitting at the bar. It's pretty busy. And there's this guy that starts talking to me next to me. And I literally learn like his whole life story probably in 30, 45 minutes. Like he's telling me everything about his parents' dynamic, divorce, how he grew up, his dad's second wives, all that. And, literally I knew I could write an autobiography about this guy. And sometimes I think that's crazy. I'm like, is it me and people just let freely tell me their whole life. But I think I took a lot of like things from his story and he probably didn't even know. So he's going on and telling me all these things. He was in the military, then he got out. Now he's a truck driver. But he was younger. And we were just talking. So I go to the restroom. I come back and he had paid for my whole tab. And I said, "Oh, that's very kind of you." He's like, "Let me get you another beer." And I had only had one, so I was like, "All right, I can have one more with this gentleman that was so kind to pay for my meal." So we have one more and we go back and there's like kind of like this like live music in the back and it's really cool and there's all these games. So we're kind of hanging out there and we both like music. So we're talking about music and all these things. And it was such a weird thing because sometimes you go from like just a happy, positive, like da 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 da. So the next thing you know, he's like, just stay now, Amarillo, because I was gonna keep driving. I wasn't staying there, or at least not right there. I was trying to make time. And he was like, stay and we'll go out and we'll go drinking and I'll get a hotel and you can just stay the night with me and like whatever you want to stay, whatever you want to do. And I was like, no, I really just need to have like this journey by myself. Like I didn't really want like another character, I guess, in the journey. And I knew he wasn't supposed to be in it for any more than just hearing his life story. I don't know how to explain that. So I was like, no, no. But he was like very persistent to the point where I was like, I don't know how to get out of this. So I like text one of my girls in Tennessee. I texted a couple of my friends and I'm like, please call me. Like, and I wasn't like fearing for my life, but I was like, I don't know how to be more direct than I'm not doing that. And so she calls me. And so I get up and I like, oh, I got to get this call, answer the phone. And I literally sneak out of the big Texan and like go to my car. It's like a whole, it's just so funny because I give men credit for their persistence and like that, but it's kind of like I don't think I could say no 5 more times. I feel like it was just weird. So that was like an interesting part. So I was like, "Okay, this is like not it." So I thankfully she helps, I get out of there, drive off, go to my hotel, do my whole little thing. And then the next day, I'm going to Oklahoma out of my way because I want to see my grandma. So my grandma is like almost 97 and it's my dad's mom. And weirdly through this whole journey, and I don't know if anyone like else can kind of relate, but like since I lost my dad, sometimes I feel like I just feel him so much through her, even though they're different in so many ways. And so I just felt like my dad wanted me in Tennessee, and I can't even explain it to anyone really, but I felt like I needed to see her too, like again, because there's so much that ties into my story and how I even got here. And it really began in Oklahoma for her 95th birthday. And so that's a story for another time, but so much just ties me. Like there's so many weird things. So anyways, as I'm thinking so much here, but so is me. I go to Oklahoma. We have this great time where, I see my grandma. My aunt had some things that she and my grandma lived together with her new husband, and we caught up, and it was just so good because I feel like it brought me closer to my dad again. And for some reason, I feel like, and I saw someone do an interview about this, about like death when you lose someone you love, how much it changes you. And I feel like not only like leaving a relationship or something that you're like grieving that change, but I feel like the death of my dad completely changed my entire rest of my life, and it continues to. And I knew that, but it just continues to be something that I think impacts my day-to-day decisions. Like I really think about making him proud or being a good person, or how do I touch people? How can I be more like him? How can I show kindness more? It's crazy. And maybe I wouldn't think like that if he was still here. You know, it's weird. It's weird that someone comes in your life and then is gone. But I think about that when I saying this about my dad. I'm in the back of my head, I'm trying to think that maybe that will be the same for my ex. Although I'm still alive, I'm gone to for him, and maybe that me leaving is going to put him in a better place for the future, making decisions that are better because of that loss. So here I am just tying it all together. But I go to Oklahoma, have a great time, and then I head to Arkansas. And I go to this little bar. I was going to go to a show out there, but I end up not. And I go to the bar, this bar in Arkansas, and I remember just end up talking to this guy who had been divorced too. I swear, the people that were telling me their stories of their life, it was like I felt like so intentional, like the people I was meeting, like the guy in Amarillo. Now we have this divorced bartender, and just him telling me what happened with his marriage and his perspective. It's just sometimes too, I think I brought this up, but for a woman, like we need to hear we need to hear both sides. Because I think through this whole process, I've learned that obviously men and women think so differently. But when we understand that, like you really understand that communication is such a key piece, right? Like such a key piece of all the things that just make life easier if we're willing to just articulate things. And I went back, and when I'd hear like this, like a man's perspective on like why it didn't work and all these things, I realized sometimes like communication and lack of like the different mindset and the different ways we think, like sometimes makes relationships more hard than they need to be. And it really taught me a lot about how I want to be in the future. And I have to go back to when I was in Colorado, actually, really quick, because not that it's funny, because I literally, it all came clear to me when I was there. I walked into the Starbucks, and I remember just feeling as I left Utah, like that I could feel my ex had like known I was there and maybe felt I was leaving. I don't know if he could or not. That's just how I felt. And when I was in the Starbucks, just getting my, I don't know, large Americano, I just started crying in the Starbucks. It was like packed. There was a line. And I just could not uncontrollably. I was just crying. And I go and do my order, and the girl's probably like, oh my, what's going on with this girl? And everyone could see me. Like, it was just like, why? Why are you just teary eyed crying in the Starbucks, girl? And I get back in the Suburban, and I'm like, I feel so bad that me leaving has to impact my ex the way that it did. I'm just crying because I'm feeling that me having the life that I want to have has to change his life so much. I hated that truth. That probably was the hardest part for me in this journey back home as I'm doing all these things and I'm feeling like all of these things, everything's coming down on me. And I'm just going, I feel so guilty. How could I? But then it's like, I know I needed to think, how could you choose yourself? It's like, you have to, Heather. But I hated that choosing myself and choosing my own happiness in the direction I wanted to be and where I wanted to go he had to have the collateral damage of that. Like his life had to change so much because I wanted to change mine. I I couldn't stop crying. I literally had to like kind of like get myself out of that mindset. It was really hard, but I think I needed to release it. Like it still came up, but I think that that trip was releasing it all. And then everyone I met along the way kind of telling me their perspective about their own, even if it was, the Amarillo big Texan guys, dad and mom's perspective on their divorce, and then the Arkansas bartender's perspective on why him and his wife didn't work. Like hearing other people's perspectives, it just made me open my eyes to things and maybe realize like we were together for so long and I grew up not understanding how to navigate all the things and the hard conversations. And part of who I have been was just sweeping things under the rug and not being confrontational. And I realized that maybe had I been more confrontational about things sooner, maybe I wouldn't have resented things later. And not that I'm thinking these things because I wanted to try to fix it, because I knew it was already broken. And it was just not going to ever be able to. It was kind of like if you took a plate and you threw it on the ground and the pieces were everywhere, some glass plate. I mean, you could put them back together, but the plate would never ever be the same. And that's another piece that I realized how impactful our words are. Like the things that we say are like those broken plates. Is that once you throw that plate on the ground or you say that word, you can glue it back together, but it's always going to be there. And so it just reminded me how important it is to like express your feelings, but in a very like mindful and respectful way, because we're all just walking around like trying the best we can. And our words can hurt someone so much when they're already trying to figure out life and they don't know what they're doing and they're just trying. And so I'm kind of going off track here a little bit, but I'm taking myself back to that place in that journey of just letting go and trying to give myself grace for not being the perfect wife the first time around. I mean, that's hard to say out loud, and now I know no one can be perfect, right? Like perfection isn't really what we're aiming for. It's just doing the best that we can and then acknowledging when we make mistakes and then moving forward. But I think sometimes in our lives we just want to do everything right the first time, and that just makes us do things wrong because we don't really know and we don't really accept that it's just not going to be perfect. We just have to let it be and let it go. Wow, that was a lot. But then to kind of wrap this up, I stopped in Memphis after Arkansas and the deep combo with the divorced bartender. And I remember I bought a record, Chris Stapleton, because starting over has also been a very much theme song of this journey. Because I saw Chris Stapleton was the first concert I went to after the separation. And that song was just like, oh my gosh, am I starting over? And I was. So, yeah, I felt like buying that album in Memphis before I got back to Nashville was just very like the ending. Here we're really just starting all over. You have left everything that you had in Salt Lake behind. All of your belongings are with you. You've left the office and the job you had in Salt Lake, and you're just new Heather doing life in Nashville, Tennessee. And it makes me happy because when I say that, I hope that if you're listening, you feel like you can do that too. Like if you're not happy with where you are, you can be somewhere else. You can go do something new. You can take chances. And just because you take chances doesn't mean everything always works out how you think it will. That's probably the most wild piece of it. I had no idea how everything would work out, and it just has. And there's still been moments of like, oh, I didn't know it was going to work out like that. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to work out exactly how I think it should. I just have to trust that it will work out. I have to stop trying to control the how and just trust that if I do things with the best intentions, with kindness in my heart, and I'm true to myself, I communicate what I need, everything in life will just happen for me. So the very, very opposite of any kind of victim mindset. And I hope that's what we can kind of take from life is that like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. This is never going to work. How is this going to, those thoughts just never get you where you need to be. They keep you where you always are. And I haven't really done this yet, but I only hope, and I don't even know if I should say this, but I only hope that anybody who's been left by someone they thought they loved or they did love, and they're trying to figure out why, they can just move on. They can just say, it's okay. And I'll end this by this quote that I saw. And it says, imagine being bit by a snake, and instead of trying to help yourself heal and recover from the poison, you're trying to catch the snake to find out the reason it bit you and prove to it that you didn't deserve that. Just heal and move on. Leave be what isn't meant for you. Heal and move on because you deserve to. Thank you so much for listening to Wandering the Wild Mess with Heather Morgan. Remember, You matter.